Greatness. 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 Bow, bow, bow. Greatness.
Welcome to the Renewing the Mind podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Sanchez. Joined with me is my dad, Dr. Raul Sanchez. How you doing, Dad?
I'm feeling amazing. Like back in the day at NDSU, we had a saying, those who stay will play. Those who play will be champions. Once a champion, always a champion, baby. There's some proof right there. They should be.
And there's the ring kiss. On this
Let's
podcast,
go.
we teach you how to renew your perspective, move towards uncertainty, and find what's awesome about that in every situation. And don't forget, there's 2 times to be great. You feel like it, and when you don't.
Amen.
How you feeling
That's
today?
awesome. I'm feeling awesome.
Perfect.
This is one of those topics that you don't want to have, but absolutely need to have. And when you're done having the conversation, you're like, why was I so afraid? Right. So let's just dispel a myth right now. The number one myth is that you can't talk to kids or teens about suicide because I might make them think about it. Listen, this is going to be over the top, but Tyler came to me at age 9 and basically told me stories about condominiums and why men needed them. It just took me a blink of an eye, and I'm like, bro's not talking about apartment buildings. Okay.
Good old condominiums.
And I'm eating a sandwich going, huh? Yeah. You want a brat, bro? Like, no, like where I got scheduled to have this conversation when you're 11, that's 2 years from now. Like, listen, parents tell me all the time, like, I'm so afraid to have this conversation because I think I could spark like something like give them a pre-setting to I'm like, believe me, they've heard this stuff since kindergarten. Think about a little kid who's playing a video game and just throws that out there like I should kill myself. Okay. Yep. It's out there. By you not having the conversation, You're sending the signal that you missed the data and kids are just invisible. So the number one myth is I don't want to have this conversation because I'll spark that conversation or I'll spark that thought. That's a myth. It's a lie. I promise you, it's stinky, it's thick, it's gross, it's like my hands are sweating, I don't know what to do. Afterwards, you're gonna text your friends and be like, I have no idea why that was even spooky to me. I promise you.
Yep.
So that's the topic we're moving into, is we're talking about suicide again, more a deeper dive on the teens. And the funny thing is, once you have this conversation, it opens up the world. I'm not kidding, the world. Like, I promise you, like, out of all the things you think about right now, if you have kids and you're watching this, even if they're young, even if they're grown, and you think, man, I just want to give them a great life. I just want them to have a better life than I had. I mean, think about this. Like, I mean, there's no show of hands, or I don't expect you to put in the comments, but I promise you, if you don't have parents who talk about suicide and the deep issues, you're not very close. It's that simple. And if you have those parents who you can talk about anything, you're in the majority of people who are wealthy. Like, that's wealth. That's true, absolute wealth. If you can call your parents and talk about anything in the world, think about that for a second. Okay. That's what I want you to focus on. That's why we're going to circle back and do this. I'm going to try not to be redundant on some of this stuff. The most important thing I want to talk about is the teens and why they're in such high crisis at this time in their life.
Yeah, and this is for, if even if you're not a parent of a teen.
Right.
I see we'll shout out Josh Ruby,
J. Rube,
youth pastor in Wisconsin. The Smiths are here, teachers to elementary and middle school students.
Yep.
Alex Pick, young kids now, but one day we'll probably have to wrestle with this, not at this age, but
helping to launch a church.
Yeah, helping to launch a church, conversations, family friends that maybe have older children. And reality is the teens and the same conversations we can have with them, that also translates to adults as well, right?
Correct. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
One thing I want to just go into it is I follow a guy named Manny Arango, and he's a theologian. We saw him at a live conference at New Hope, and he has online course called Arma, and I just bought into it. And so what he says is that when the church, he's talking to youth pastors, he says when the church doesn't talk about hot topics, sex, homosexuality, suicide, all of these different things, that they become the non-experts in those fields. So he said that science proves, and he can show you, that the first person to initiate the topic becomes, in that person's mind, the expert.
Yes.
So if you go back to he said anything, someone tells you, oh, Chipotle is better than Qdoba, the first person to tell you that, then that's always the thing that you go back to when you hear that. Or whatever, for sporting teams or an athletic events, or these type of genes over this type of, anything that someone has, the first person to bring it to you, that is kind of then what you bounce everything else off of, is that first thing you heard. And so when you're talking about, in this specifically, suicide prevention, these kids are growing up and hearing that from a super young age. And then we come in when they're like 18 or 19 and start talking about it. They've had 7 or 8 years of the world telling them, and them thinking, oh, they're the expert on that field because they've talked about it for so long. So it's like, when is the church and parents going to be the first person and be the expert and lead, just by opening the conversation?
Right. And I just told you that story. We were in Iowa City. I was in graduate school, and I literally had a DVD, or basically back then it called the CD-ROM, that we were going to go over and talk about the birds and the bees. Okay.
I remember it very vividly.
Yeah, we did it, but I thought I was early. Like, okay, I'm going to start this maybe 10, maybe on the way to 11. And, you were 9 turning 10 and already had that information. So psychologically, that's called the primacy effect, which if you're the number one, you're first. And then the opposite is you have to be the last person to talk about it, which is then that's the recency effect. So if you're first or last, it hits home. If you're in the middle, you get lost.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing I want to say real quickly is Christians are so shy and so cliche. Like, we might say, you might see one of your kids crying and you're like, it's going to be okay, honey. God loves you. Like, that's not the question. Like, I know God died for me, but can I be in pain? And sometimes we just have stupid approaches. Seriously. And it's like, it's going to be okay, honey. God loves us. Like, it's going to be okay, honey. We'll go to church on Sunday. Like,
or like when Momo passed away and people were like, well, at least heaven got another angel. I was like,
yeah. I mean,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
So I'm a Christian and I'm going to heaven, and I'm like, I'm
You'll see here one day. I'm like, oh,
sold
well,
out for
that's
Jesus, but
it's a reassurance,
mean,
but it doesn't make what I'm going through right now any better.
yeah. So I can't feel,
Yep.
So, okay. So here's the reason why this is so important for teens. Okay. So G. Stanley Hall, famous psychologist, coined the term adolescence. Because if you look in the Bible, there's no term for teen or adolescence. It's a child and then you're an adult. So, he coined the term using some research. And the reason is he coined the term storm and stress first, because it was a period of time. Think about this: storm and stress. So you're under stress all the time. And then once in a while, you hit a storm where it's like crisis. Stress, storm, right? So I'm not good. Now I'm in crisis. I'm not good. I'm in crisis. And that was coming out in the research, I believe, in the 50s. And so he coined that term, storm and stress. Why are these kids going through storm and stress? And then it became, there's an adolescent period. Okay. So here are the top 3 reasons why kids are very vulnerable for crisis in these teen years. All right. Number 1 is conflict with parents and or authority figure. So your parents are the authority. Your parents make the rules. And sometimes, to be honest, your parents have old school rules. Like, I'm parenting you this way because my dad did it to me. That kind of stuff. Like, why do you have to eat porridge? Like, what is porridge? I don't know. My grandma served it on Sunday. And you're going to eat your porridge. So kids rebel right away because sometimes those rules are stupid, especially if you're a child and your parents are gone. They left the earth or they're not present. Then you're raised by a grandparent. That really is distant. You're 2 generations away then. So number 1 is conflict with parents and authority. Number 2, mood disturbances. They're great one day, they're off that day. That one day, they're 2 and 3 times up, down. Their voice cracks, they get weird, they have body odors. They're going through all these mood and hormonal changes that a lot of times we don't know that, especially back then when they had no idea teens were going through all these pieces, right? And the last one, and this scares us the most, is risky behaviors. So they get into this thing called groupthink. And when you're in a group, there's usually a group lead. And when that group leader takes a jump or says, hey, we're doing this, people don't have the ego strength to say, nah, man, I'm not listening to you. I'm not doing that. Okay. Because then you get ousted from the group. So people are more likely to go with the group rather than say, no, I'm not doing that. Okay. So those 3 reasons, right? Conflict with authority, mood changes, and then risky behavior. That puts them in a lifetime of storm during their adolescent years, and then some episodic crashes with what we call the crises. So that's why this is so important to learn how to have those conversations. Okay.
Okay.
So the number 1 thing I wanted you to hear was the myth, right? We can't talk about this because we'll spark this conversation or we'll spark this thought. That's a myth. Number 2, I want you to understand this. Parents try to protect their kids, move them to a suburb somewhere, move them to an acreage somewhere. Like, we're going to protect my kids from all this stuff. In essence, you're actually making them weak, because when they do hit the crisis, they're not going to have anyone to turn to, and they don't have any models of what I'm supposed to do. So what that means is I want you as a parent just to know that my kids are going to face a crisis. My kids are going to face distress, and I need to help them understand, number 1, how do we cope? How do we communicate? How do we problem solve?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's the most
biblical.
important thing.
In this world, you will have trouble.
Yes.
Not you may,
Absolutely.
or you might, it might
You
not
will.
have. In this world, absolutely 100%, you will have trouble.
Correct.
Hardships.
Absolutely. And
But
so
take heart, I've overcome the world.
absolutely. Right.
Okay.
And
We'll
so
jump into this.
and we have those pieces that are really important. All right. So we have a list real quickly. We're just gonna kind of push through this list of.
You want to hit this safety plan sequence, or you want to go through the list first?
Let's go to the list first, because like when you first start conversation, people always say this. Okay, number 1, I don't want to have this conversation because they might think of this thought. That's busted. Number 2, I don't know what to say. All right, well, we're going to help you. Here's what not to say. So in the research, if you know what to do or you know what not to do, you're equally as gifted. Yep. So here's because there's more reasons of what don't you do. And so let's just go over some of those. So number 1, what don't you do? Like, what not to do? Don't grab your child and say, hey, just get it together. Once you get it together, then you'll be okay.
Yep. Another one says, just be mindful and think positive.
Right. Another one is, hey, just snap out of it.
Don't say, just get over it.
Yeah. This one makes me laugh. Walk it off, rub some dirt on it. It's just a phase. You'll get past it.
Yeah, I think that's really old school thinking too, as well.
Rub some dirt on it, bro.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
you're rubbing dirt on his forehead, like
it's not in here, but I think that rub some dirt on it. I think that comes back to that old school, like, well, are you bleeding?
yes,
And I think so many times today I talk to students, and that's it's a different kind of conversation, but it's the same way why people self-harm, right? It's because they can't they don't feel the physical pain. They have emotional pain where they can't say this hurts or I broke my arm. And so that idea where, well, you're not bleeding, you're fine. I think it's the same thing as, throw some dirt on it, walk it off.
Yeah, and that concept again is a myth. Like, I don't want to let my boy know that, like, it's okay to be weak, or it's okay to feel pain, or it's okay to cry. I want my boy to be tough. It's just the opposite. If I hug him and say, hey, you know what? When I was a kid, I was afraid too. When I got hit by a baseball, I bawled too. It's okay. It's part of the drill. Then you feel normal. You feel tough.
Another one is don't keep thinking that way because it's just going to make it worse. Get on with it. Move on.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then this one, this is all happening because you're weak and you need to become stronger.
Yep. Another one says, don't dismiss it and say, well, my life is hard too. So like all of the other people that have it worse, there's so many other people that have it worse than you.
Yes. Don't do that. Don't compare. Here's another one. Just focus on others more than yourself. Then you'll forget about it.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine what?
Yeah, that's like saying, well, the joke, like, Dad, my arm hurts. Well, let me punch your leg, and then your arm won't hurt as bad.
Yeah, how dumb is that?
Right. Don't say that's just all in your head.
Yes, and then here's another one.
Because the reality is, it is all in your head. It's your thoughts.
Yeah, right. But the way they say it is demeaning, like, aha, you're psycho.
Right.
Not right.
Or we'll just change the Go ahead.
Right. And a lot of it doesn't start mental. A lot of it's a physical breakup, or like, I didn't make the cheer team, or I got cut from football. So, okay, here's another one. Just think of everyone else you'll hurt if you go through with this. Focus on your family and friends and how they'll feel. It'll all just go away.
Yep. This person said anything that is any sort of dismissive is absolutely not helpful in any circumstance. So no part of being dismissive.
Yeah, no part of being dismissive. Okay, so the general principle of what not to say is dismissive things. So, like, just like Tyler said, anything dismissive, you don't hear me, you don't see me, you don't feel my pain, you're not here. And it's a popular thing to people. It's like when you're talking to somebody, you just go, bro, do you feel me? Like, are you with me? Do you get it? And so that's what I want you to understand is, like, your job isn't to dismiss, it's to try and feel and understand. So the number one thing I want you to understand is they just simply need somebody to listen and to understand. Listen and understand. So if you have this concept, like, I don't know what to say, but I'm a good listener, you're perfect. If you're like, I just hear things and I can put together pieces, like, I'm really good at connecting dots, you're perfect. Okay. If you're a judgy person and kind of cuts people down, you're not that good at this. So you got some work to do. Okay. So then what to say? So one of the things that people like to hear, and I didn't understand it as a young psychologist. I get it now because it just manifests understanding. But the concept that just says you are okay exactly like you are, even though you don't even really know what's going on yet, just saying that, like, they feel like you see something on the outside that they can't see because they're inside looking out. And then the other one is just if you touch them somewhere and say, it's going to be okay. Now, I never like saying that because I have this, like, lie thing. Like, I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. So it feels like a lie to me. But in the concept of the majority of people, over 2/3 who think of suicide never make an attempt. And the slightly under 1/3 make an attempt. Okay. So that means the vast majority have thoughts and then they turn.
Yep.
So if you say, hey, this is going to be okay, they buy in. Like, you're that first person to tell them that, right? So you are okay exactly how you are. And then the second piece is, hey, this is going to be okay. I'm here for you.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that, especially in culture. It's okay to not be okay. That's a new saying that's kind of popularized. It's okay to be hurt or in pain. And just to clarify the touching, you're talking about, like a hand on the shoulder, like a hand on their, like, kneecap. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Good clarification. And that's assuming that you know the person as well. So a lot of times if I know them, I just lay my hand on top of their hand, or
Yep.
I'll just touch their fingers and as I talk to them, just to let them know
Yep.
to build some presence. Okay.
The other one says, sit with me. This is a suggestion to sit with them, to listen to their thoughts, and just show them that you are there for them and that you want to reach out to them.
Yes. Yeah. So a listener and an understanding person. And then the most important piece is I'm here for you. Like I'm not going anywhere. Like I got you. And that's the
Yep.
most important piece, is like somebody who's there with you. Because remember, depression, suicidal thoughts, it's all about being mentally trapped and being physically isolated. They're alone. And so as we break into that concept, we start to really feel like we can help somebody. Okay. So cool. All right. So let's go into the safety planning. So the safety planning is something that Stacy's going to be posting in the chat. So you can have that list there. Oh, there it is. Good. So these are just kind of things that I just pulled just off the top of my head, because this is what we go through. The number one goal is to help people understand that there are actually safety plans and sequences that we can enact, we can put into play, literally just like you call a play in a football or a volleyball game. Like, this is our play. And so as we kind of go through this entire list, okay, so you have your breathing, self-regulation. You have number 2, which is behavioral distraction. So this is to get their mind unstuck on the distress and pain. So that could be anything from listening to music. That could be like playing a video game. That could be watching their favorite movie. That could be, taking the dog for a walk, whatever that is to them, as you build a distraction list, because some things will work for them, some things won't. That next one is contact the circle of friends. That could be individually, or some of them like a group chat of like close people they can contact. That could be church leaders, could be a youth pastor. Number 4, a list of reasons for living. These are attachments to people, attachments to a plan or a boyfriend or girlfriend or animals. Number 5, activity planning. Once you kind of contact your circle of friends, right away we need to put something in the calendar. The research shows if they look forward to something, it actually stops them from being stuck. They can see outside there, is it all worth it piece. If they don't have a circle of friends, they can have a community. Like if they just go to a community outing, like, the youth just had a citywide event, that's a community event. Or they can even go to a solo thing. So they can go out to eat their favorite restaurant. They can go to a movie. 6, exercise and outdoors. 7, they can call their mental health therapist and schedule an appointment. 8, we can remove the lethal means, guns, and especially the opioids and drugs that will, if they take them, they'll OD. Those are really important. Now, when people hear that, they're like, dude, I don't even know what to say. What are you talking about? Okay, so if we back up and we say, I didn't do anything that says do not do, and I'm just trying to sit and I'm just trying to communicate like, hey, let me help understand your pain. Talk to me about your pain. And so once you're in that circle with that person, once you said, hey, I'm here for you, once you're in this conversation, just hit it head on, just directly. Like, hey, I'm just being honest with you. Like, I see you are acting different. Like, can you tell me what's going on? And they say, yeah, don't worry about it. Say, I'm just going to ask you, like, have you been having like dark thoughts? A lot of times kids say dark thoughts. So, hey, have you been having dark thoughts? And if they say, what do you mean? Don't say, well, you know what I mean. They don't. So they might not want to breach it. So then I would say, well, I mean, like dark thoughts, like I don't want to be alive anymore. Like, I don't want to be on this earth. Like, have you been thinking about suicide? And you'll see them cry, or you'll see them just have a relief. Like somebody knows. And then they can spill out what I'm talking about. Okay. So now at that point, it depends on what they're saying. Is like, I don't have any friends. Okay. So you look on your list and you think, okay, so we need to make a contact of a circle of friends. Like, who could you call? Who can you contact? Who's in your list? Well, I'm in your list. I'm here for you. And then you start there. And then we can build this list backwards, because over time, they'll put it in order. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, some people like to call number 7 first. They've had these suicidal thoughts and they call and they get on our wait list. And then by the time, or they get in that next day, sometimes by the time they come in, they're like, man, I was in a huge crisis, but I'm actually feeling pretty good. But here's what we can talk about today. Like, the storm's over. So now they just have some stress to talk about. But just having any of these on this list, this safety planning, proves in the research that people have something to look forward to. They feel like they have a life plan again. They feel like there's some sequence of life that's happening or going to happen.
Yeah. I think so many times that we think that that call licensed therapist, call you. I think so many times in our life we think that is the only way, or
Right.
like even some of my adult leaders will be like, dude, I'm not prepared for this. And my thing's like, sometimes just sit like on a Wednesday night when a kid will come up and say, some of these things, just I won't even say anything. I'll just be sitting there like, oh yeah, no, I felt some of that before, and I've been abandoned, and or I've been through a breakup, or I understand what that feels like, and or maybe not to your level, but can I pray with you? And I don't say anything just life shattering, but they're able to express it, know someone cares, know someone heard, know
Yeah.
someone that can maybe send a text the next day. They'll leave and be
Right.
like, oh, I feel so much better. And I'm like, didn't really do much. Like, to be honest,
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, at the core, it's super serious stuff. But when we're doing it and you go through that, what to say and what not to say, it's
Yeah.
kind of common sense. Don't
Right.
say anything stupid and be there,
Yeah. Right.
you know?
Yeah. And so remember, the biggest thing they want to know is, can you listen? Can you just listen without judging me? And that's huge, right? Number two, can you understand? Do you understand the pain I'm in? And the last one is, can you identify my pain? And sometimes they'll talk about their pain, like, hey, a boyfriend broke up with me over a rumor, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I should live. So
Yep.
their pain's right out there real quickly. So really all you do is you just kind of be a catcher. You just field what you have, and then you just say it back to them. Okay, so really you're really hurt because your boyfriend broke up with you over a rumor.
Yep.
Right. And rumors probably not even something you started, and you just start to just check in. So that piece is really, really cool, because from there you can help build the list. Now, as you're there, like there's some important pieces. Like sometimes people go, I don't know how to break that ice. The answer is just use a hammer. Like, just break the ice, ask the hard question fast. Like, don't beat around the bush. That's what everybody does. And nobody has the guts or the courage to ask. So ask. Then once you're there, you're in this conversation after a while, you can easily pull up your phone and just type in suicide safety plan, and you'll find it from somewhere, from some research university. It'll pop up. You'll see a list. They'll be in just random order. It's okay.
Sure.
You can kind of just take a look really quickly and be like, okay, we're in circle of friends, or really quickly, like, this person's panicking, like they can't breathe, like they think they're having a heart attack. So you just work on breathing, just get them to breathe. And the easy thing I do for breathing is I just have them pretend you're sitting in an ocean, and pretend that the ocean wave comes into your feet. Just close your eyes and visualize this. The wave comes in, you inhale with your feet. The wave goes out, you breathe out of your mouth. You inhale with your nose, you exhale with your breathing, with the wave leaving your feet. And you just kind of do that for a little bit. And it's pretty amazing. You'll just see this peace come over them.
Yep.
And once you feel like, okay, I'm making some headway here, I don't have to be a therapist. I just have to be a good listener. Because anybody who jumps in and they share with you, you're deemed trustworthy. And so even before I was good at this, before I didn't know what to do, I would say this just because I literally had nothing else to say. It didn't have the actual technique. So I would say, thank you for trusting me, and just spit it out, cliche, like, thank you for trusting me. I didn't know what to say. Thank you for trusting me. And they just kept going. Just kept going. It turns out through some resilience training, it's like, when they feel like you're saying that, they feel like, wow, you really are thankful for being here. And they just start dumping. Okay. So
Yep.
that's another one. Go ahead.
Two things I always tell my adult leaders to use is, like you talking about breaking the ice, just do it with a hammer. I
Yeah.
always tell them to start off by saying, hey, I'm asking this because I love you. And then
Yeah.
ask, I'm asking this because I care about you.
Perfect.
Have you had any dark thoughts?
Yeah.
Like
Correct.
that's an easy lead in, rather than just like, oh, have you had any dark
Yeah.
thoughts, or you think about,
Right.
it's an easy way to let them know it. Once again, I care. And then the other one is, when you talk about looking stuff up, I always tell my leaders from the biblical side of it, and scriptures and stuff, but it applies to here perfectly, is to be like, you know what? I don't really know what to do in this situation. Let's look this up together.
Yeah.
Pull your phone out. Let's Google top 5 things to do with dark thoughts or suicide thoughts, or hey, let's Google together suicide prevention. I always tell them to do that on the opposite. When someone comes up, like, has a question about hell or heaven or theology, and they don't know, dude, the kids don't, especially teens, they don't want you to know everything. They want you to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell, even on like Fortnite questions, don't try to make up something. Don't try to lie. Oh, you playing with the controller? It's like, don't say that. Just be like, dude, I have no idea. Last game I played was Pong. The last thing I played was Tetris on Game Boy. That's more authentic to them than coming across and acting like and calling it face chat or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't make any sense. It's the same thing. Don't sit here and be like, oh well, here's the best things to do with suicide prevention. Be like, you know what? I to be honest, I don't really know what that looks like. Let's look this up together. Let's come up with a plan together.
Yeah. And the idea of just being 100% authentic, not having to direct the show, but I'm in their ship, they have the rudder, and this could be a 2-hour process.
Yeah, or even ask them.
Yeah.
How so you have these feelings, you have these thoughts, you got this dark stuff. Like what can I do to help that?
Right.
Yeah. Is it a text message? Is it a call? Can I go with you to talk to your parents about it? Like what, if you are the parent, hey, let's go to dad and talk about this. Let's pull mom into this conversation. I mean, there's 100 different things that just literally let them kind of lead in some sort of way.
Yeah. Let them kind of help you with that list. You can kind of just go over the list, or you show them the list and just help them and just ask them. The next thing is like, hey, do you have anything to look forward to? Do you have anything planned?
Yep.
Right. And so start looking at their community activities. A lot of times they get broken down on friends. Like, I don't have any friends. Well, then we can get them into an activity group. We can send them to a community. You can look at your not your Facebook, but your community page on your youth, and you can kind of just keep moving through there. Right. Like, so once you get really good at it, when you crack a joke, you can kind of be fun. When they're kind of loose a little bit more, you have a little bit more leeway. But I promise you, like, this suicide stuff is spooky. But once you start talking about a safety plan, like, hey, I'm just going to help you stay safe. Like, hey, I just want to work on a safety plan with you. Like, when you're really stressed, like right now, thankfully you're in my youth group, we can have this conversation. Or thankfully I saw you at this party. Like, like, who do you go to if you didn't see me tonight? That's where we build that community list real quickly. Like, who's your go-to list? Who's your top 3? And that way they have somebody to quickly go to. Because here's the thing, like, it's crazy to think about from the outside looking in. We all see that somebody who's depressed, they look weak, they look meek, they look timid, they look anxious, they look broken. There's all these things that trigger, like, I'm resilient, bro. Like, I don't mess with those people. Like, that's the kind of concept that we may portray toward them. But you have to understand something, and this is the part I want people to understand. There are 2 huge pieces that make people at risk for depression, anxiety, suicide, bipolar, ADHD, all of it. The first one is called epigenetics, and epigenetics is the interaction between your genetic sequence code, DNA, your genetic sequence code called DNA, and the active stress inside your environment. So your DNA from your parents, right? Let's say there's a genetic predisposition for depression in our life, dyslexia, anxiety, ADHD, like, that's our family because of alcoholism, because of drug addictions. Okay. So we hit the ground. We already have like 3 major risk factors as a family, as a genogram of family tree. So we're already at risk. Then all we have to do is, if we land to the right parents who are financially super well off, and they put us in tutoring, and they put us with coaches, and they put us and kind of protect us and shell us. I see those kind of kids that don't even know they have a family history of depression, but those kids crash late in high school, and they crash hard because it's their first ever episode. It's their first ever crisis. Or they get to college as a freshman when they have no resources. They have no tutor. They have nobody checking in on them. They have no nanny. Those guys fall completely off the grid. So they come back, not even just to reboot, but they come back flunked out, and they don't usually go back to school. So the issue is they haven't been trained resiliently how to deal with the storms and stress of life because they've been protected all the way through. Now think about this. You have a kid like me who's born with all those genetic predispositions, and you're dropped to an alcoholic stepfather, right? And you're dropped to a single parent mom. So those things hit hard all the time. So as a little kid, I'm depressed, and I just took my stuff out on people when they started picking on me for being the little meek kid. I didn't have the confidence I had, after I was playing football. Like, I got picked on because I was quiet, could barely speak English, like all that stuff. Like, it was crazy. And so if you think about just looking at it from that standpoint, we all have genetic risk factors. And there's this super, super cool, it's a whole nother talk, we'll do it later, but called epigenetics. And so DNA has to come broken down like in translation, because DNA is a super tough code. So your RNA breaks down that code, and your RNA breaks down that code and kind of breaks it into the small proteins that then our brain can feed off of. Okay. So epigenetics is the daily interaction of who I was born to be and how my daily environment shapes me. So you guys always laugh about this as kids, but you know, like everything from crawling, everything from playing monkey when we run up and down the steps, all these little things, those are caveman workout stuff, or running hills, like all the stuff we've done, I've put into play to get you. And I get it, like I'm different. This is who we are, but like to get into play, like to change epigenetics. So I knew I couldn't change your genetic predispositions, but I knew I could lessen the load. And it all comes back to that last thing on that list. I don't know if I put it last, but exercise and outdoors, because those are the two pieces that I can control. Those are the two pieces that continue to shape my environment. So if you and I talk about this one time, Ty, but like if you bleed in practice, you don't have to bleed in the auditorium like during the game day, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you bleed more in practice, you can be more successful in game day. And that's how we think about this. So if you think about your kids, if you go to the park and they just want to sit in the grass and like eat, just tell them, say like, hey, no, let's go run in the hills. And they're not going to go do it unless you lead them. So as you start to lead them, walk hills, you start to climb nets, you start to do all those little bitty pieces of their micro resilience building. And I know this, you guys think that this is just me, but it's not. So if you take a look at like the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, it's on their website. And the research comes from the University of Toronto, but they found out that the number one safety planning suicide prevention risk factor is if you show them models of people who felt like them, who thought like them, but resiliently climbed out. That's if you have a story like, hey, I was working with this guy. I'm making this up, by the way. Hey, I worked with this guy, Joey, and you know, he had a concussion and had to quit his sport, and he was suicidal. And then he did this and this and this, and here's his safety plan, and here's what he did, and here's his community. And now, believe it or not, like he's in college and he teaches a small group of people how to be resilient through suicidal prevention. They'll be like, where's he at? Can I see him? And you look him up on Facebook or look him up on Instagram. And as soon as you show him, that'll save that kid's life. Just that simple. So, but here's what everybody always says. Well, how do you make somebody resilient when they're stuck and they're facing this breakup and they think it's the end of the world? Dude, don't be on that high horse. Think back to when you were 14. Think back to when you were 16.
Yep.
You didn't think one of those things was going to end your life. I remember dislocating my shoulder when I was 17. I thought I thought of suicide because I was like, dude, my only hope is to go play college football. Now what the freak?
Yeah.
You know, and I talked to, it's probably stupid, but I talked to a surgeon and he was like, well, you're going to be out 12 weeks. Probably you're not going to be able to get hit. So I'm like, nah, I'm not taking surgery. It's probably stupid because then I dislocated it again in college. Yep. But I still got to play. I put on a brace and taped it up, played with a dislocated shoulder. Like there are times when you think back then, whatever happened to you, that crisis was the end of the world. And it took some adult or somebody to pull you out of that. And we have to help them know through a resilient story of how I landed on just happenstance or somebody walked me through it, a safety plan that then that built that resilience. And that's what we've got to help kids understand.
Yeah. One of the things, back to like when we're younger, things seem to be like the end of the world. I know I've told you and mom this before, but that was one of the things that I struggled with when talking to mom or you sometimes with the situations I was going through and the struggles. For instance, in 8th grade, I couldn't go to the Halloween party. And I remember mom said, Tyler, when you're 30, this is not going to make a difference. And I was just like, okay, who cares? I'm in 8th grade and this is the only Friday night that matters. Now I'm 30. I don't care that in 8th grade, I didn't go to the Halloween party that everyone went to. But in that moment, she didn't meet me where that hurt and pain, she didn't acknowledge that. I'm not throwing mom under the bus, but no, I'm saying that was one of the things, for instance, I broke up with a girl and mom or you were like, yo, there's going to be other girls. Okay, maybe. But in that moment, I thought that was the only girl that was ever going to like me. We were ever going to, we were going to get married and happily ever after. And it's like, well, get over it. There's other girls. You're in 9th grade. Or mama, always used to say, do you know the percentage of people who get married who date in high school? And I'd be like, well, you two got married.
Right? Like, on that one for sure. We're always trying to push you away from it because
or mom would be like, you just wasted all those months dating that girl for what? And I'm like, well, like that's what you do in high school. Like I understand now that I'm 33, that was all stupid, but in the moment It felt like it was the end of the world. And especially in youth ministry, these 6th graders will come in and be like, oh, this happened. I want to say so bad. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't make a difference in your life. But if you do that, then that's it. That's over. That's the last time they're going to come and talk to you about anything, because to them, that is their world. And so I think that's one of the biggest things we can take away from this is any point, just meet their feelings. We always talk about, especially I just did some pre-marriage counseling. You can't fight feelings. And then we, in Minneapolis, me and Alicia got into a fight in the hotel room. Then Lou ratted mom and dad out because they were fighting on the way to the hotel. Terrence and Mel got into a fight earlier that day. And so we all had a whole hash out and hashed it all out and talked about it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I talk about is you can't argue facts.
Yeah.
You have to you have to acknowledge feelings and then argue facts, and not necessarily argue, but discuss. Okay, you were late. That's not you can't argue that. Either you were or you weren't, and then we discuss and meet where the feelings are. So I feel abandoned. Well, you can. I can't deny that you feel abandoned, that I was late, but at the same time I had a flat tire. My phone was dead. Like, let's talk about that, but I can't deny your feelings in those matters. And I think that's where it comes to some of the suicide prevention, especially teens in crisis. You can't say, well, you broke up with your girlfriend, don't feel sad. You just can't say that. You have to acknowledge that they feel brokenhearted, depressed, sad, like they're never going to find another person in the whole world, and then bring up facts. You're in 8th grade.
Right.
There will be other ladies.
So take a look at that. So like, we're in a hotel room for my nephew's wedding. Okay. And we're all sitting there just processing, like just taking a break, eating some cookies and just hanging out. And all of a sudden,
no, it was breakfast. We're eating donuts. Remember?
Oh, was it? Was it the morning?
Yeah, because that's why remember the whole fight with the breakfast and the Grubhub.
Oh, yeah. So it was the next morning. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. And so so you and Alicia start going off, and then Valencia talks about our fight when.
No, you try to give me some advice, and then Lou was like, "Oh yeah, well you two fought on the way here." So they were like, "Yeah, Lou, tell us."
Yeah, over our podcast training on the way here, because But here's the thing: like, if I was the type of parent that says stuff like, "Hey, what happens with me and mom stays with me and mom," that kind of thing, that stoic parent, like, "Our business is our business, stay out of my marriage," or some of these people who, like, even young guys who are dating, like high school kids that are dating, and they got in a fight and they're super worried that their girlfriend's going to cheat on them or that she's going to dump them. And I was like, so like, when you talk to your dad about this, what does he say about marriage? Like, they're like, huh? Like, no, my mom and dad never fight. They never argue. So you're like, and that's terrible, because again, how does a kid in a relationship who's a teenager who thinks it's the end of the world because he might have just messed up a big time with his girlfriend, but yet he sees his parents who never fought in their life.
When they are fighting, they're just not doing it in front of them.
Right. And they just hold it together. Like, they fake it till they make it kind of thing. But when the kids leave, then there's like no hand touching. There's no nothing. If you don't
there's no
fight
model of how to fight well.
That's what I'm trying to say. If a kid doesn't have a model of being resilient in sports, in life, in exercise, in studying, in, not getting good tests on the ACT, in relationships, they're going to have a crisis, because already as a teenager, they're in a storm. One thing falls, boom, they hit the fan. So little things like that, like having family discussions over how we argued, you guys like to do it because you guys like to debate, like, who was right, dad or mom, right? And so I always feel like I'm on trial because everybody like votes for mom all the time, right?
I mean, 90% of the time it's your fault.
So, but it's okay. I'm not butthurt about it. I'm not embarrassed about it. Like, I really have come full circle from the standpoint of like, dude, I screwed up. Like, I was an idiot. And you guys are like, you were mad over that? And I'm like, it was an expectation I had, apparently. So like, I can shed that pretty quickly. Okay. But if you don't have a parent who does that, then you have a kid who's buried. And if you have a kid who's buried, I want you to think about this. If you could look at it from the idea of find the pain, identify the pain, man, I promise you, if you leave this podcast with 2 pieces of information, number one, it's a myth to say if I bring up suicide, I'm going to make them think about suicide. Bullcrap. That's a lie. Number 2, if I can identify the pain, I'm in. And they'll shed, like, if you just like pull out that, fire hydrant thing on the road and it shoots all the way across the street, that first piece is going to come out with tears and a lot of pain. And you're instantly in the inner circle. And then you're like, here's my phone number. Like, you can call me anytime. You can text me anytime. And there's all of this identity because you identified their pain. So the last thing I want to talk about is just the 5-step model. And the last 3 you should have memorized by now. If you don't, you need to check out a new podcast. I mean, like for real, bro. Like,
Yeah,
no,
it's not like we posted anywhere.
yeah, no, but for real. Okay, so I want you to think about this. Like the first thing I want you to do, step 1, identify the pain. So validate the pain or identify the pain. And if you can figure out there, just set up camp. So like, okay, so you're really hurt because you felt abandoned, and just sit on that. And every time the person's talking about it, you just circling back to abandonment. How can I help you with abandonment? What are you willing to share about your abandonment? Have you ever felt abandonment before? Just lock horns on that first pain and stay there. They'll direct you. Okay. Number 1, validate, right? And identify pain. Okay. Step number 2, listen and listen again. And when you think you're ready to talk, just talk about understanding. So like, okay, let me understand this. Let me see if I have this right. Just validate that understanding, validate that listening piece. Those are your first 2 steps, like right there. Okay. With those 2, you've done everything. If they put you in that circle of friendship, if they put you in that like, hey, list of activities to join them, now we can move to the next 3. And these 3 you haven't memorized by now, I hope. So number 3 would be you're going to renew their perspective. So once you say, hey, you're not alone. Millions of people every single year have these thoughts of like, what's the purpose in life? Like, how can I identify my purpose? Like, what's the point? What if we're all on this earth just to die, or just to live and die? Like, what's the point? Millions of people have this thought every single day. You're not alone, and you're going to be okay because you've identified this pain, and I'm here to help you through it. Right? Okay. Once you do those steps, now we can circle back to that pain and we can help them renew their perspective. Like, hey, I have a question. So you know how you felt really, really abandoned? Now that you're 3 weeks out, like, can you see that? Look back at that. Can you see it differently now? Like, do you still feel 100% abandoned, or is there another thought that comes to mind? And it's crazy. They'll be like, I'm free. Like, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm talking to someone. I'm like, ooh, dang, that's quick. Okay. So they renew their perspective pretty quickly. So you can help them renew your perspective. Okay. And then if you go back to that list of the safety planning, that's all our step 4, which is move toward uncertainty. So now you grab some activities and you have them move, because a lot of times when people break down, they don't feel successful. They don't have wins, and you have to help them build that win list, because that's what builds confidence. And then that last one is you circle back and you find what's awesome about the entire process. Like, hey, this might sound really weird, but remember when you were like going to climb under your shell because you got abandoned? And now look at you. You just make that connection to who you were and where you're at now. And pretty soon they have their own resilient story. Right. And once they have the resilient story, you're like, you know what? You could really help people with this. Okay. Like, I know this is weird, and I've been talking about this for a long time, but some of the stories that are coming out in my book, when it's published, like, I get it. But some of this is super cool because I teach my resilient story to people, and the stuff that they've grown out of, like, unreal. Like, they've defied medical like stats. It's nuts. And I believe like miracles in Jesus, and speaking and laying on hands, and like things being gone in the name of Jesus. And when I see it in front of me, I'm like, what? That's nuts. Okay. So those are the 5 steps, right? So you have to identify or validate the pain. Number 2, you have to listen and understand. And then our 3 steps, right? You got to renew, move, and find. That's what I want you to know when you jump in to talk with teens.
Okay. I like it. I got 2 things.
Okay.
My 2 final takeaways would be, don't talk about yourself and your feelings. And this is just a personal pet peeve. I'll go to coffee with someone and, I'll say, hey, I need to reach out. Can we grab coffee? And they'll like be like, yeah, sure. And we sit down and like, so what's going on? And I'm like, oh man, I'm, feeling drained. Oh yeah. One time when I felt drained back and this and that, and 4 months later, and next thing you know, it's like a half hour of their story. Then I'm like, yeah, well, I feel drained because, my wife's pregnant. Oh, I remember when my wife was pregnant. And then they go through their whole story. And it's like, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to do what we just talked about, and, and understand and tell them their story so I can relate and connect. But what it turns out to be is we spend, 75% of the time, even half the time, talking about their issue. And I'm like, well, I'm the one that wanted to confide in you. I wanted you to listen to me. So that'd be more of a personal preference than anything else. It bothers me, and I know it bothers other people when we do that as well. Or I come to tell you a really funny story, and right as I finish my funny story, you go, oh, that reminds me of my funny story. It's like that one upper. That's what it comes across as.
Yeah. And just so if you look at that back of that 5 steps, right, that's all the way down to number 4, which is move toward uncertainty. We're talking about action. Those top steps should be all ingrained into that person.
Yep. And the last one, let people know that you're not alone, which we've talked about, and that you're normal. This is a normal thing to go through. I preach a message when I go to other churches called Samesies, and we get them to see that, we have them stand up if this applies to your life. And you should see the kids' faces. I mean, everyone's in tears by the end of the night, but you should see the kids' faces when they stand up and think that they're the only one standing for anxiety. And then I have them look around, because most of the times we do things in church, it's heads bowed, eyes closed.
Yes.
And I say heads up, eyes open, and then take a look around, and they look around and they're like, whoa, no way, you and this. And, so get them to see that. I'm going to try to share something here. I posted it the other day from Carolyn Leaf. Let's see if I tried to share it last time, but it didn't work.
Okay. Yeah. So that concept is called universality. So making sure people understand that this feeling is universal. They're one of millions of people.
Oh, your boy did it.
Dude, I just asked you if you could share a picture today. You told me no.
No, Mom asked if you could put it in the comment.
Okay, I got you. So you can't share my picture, but you share yours? Okay.
No, Mom said put it in the comments. I can't put it in the comments.
Okay.
We'll do that. That's better. Does
There
that work?
go.
All right. Okay. So here's what I posted. It says, people tend to believe that grief shrinks over time. So here's grief to start, gets smaller and smaller over time. And Caroline Leaf put, what really happens is that we grow around our grief. So around that, the grief the pain for all intents and purposes doesn't necessarily go away. The loss is still there, but our jar or who we are grows around that. And so I had so many comments and so many people messaging me about that one post that I just shared. I didn't even come up with it. We didn't create it. She posted it and I just shared it from her. And then one comment I got, which I'm going to leave names out of it, obviously, but it says, okay, I needed this so much today. So I am normal. That's more like a statement. So I am normal. Doesn't feel like it sometimes. And I said, no, you're definitely normal. Don't fight the grief alone. The way you grow around it is through community and people helping you out. That's what builds your jar up.
Correct.
This person put, I really needed that. I need to do a better job at that. My poor spouse, I unleash on them from time to time. And I think the more we can understand that the way that jar grows and the way we grow around that grief is community. It's this podcast family. It's listening to podcasts. It's reading stuff. It's reading books. It's following Caroline Leaf's dad, all these different things that allow our jar, our wealth of knowledge, these 5 steps, the safety plan, the renew, move, find, all that stuff is how our jar gets bigger, because the loss, the grief, you can put depression, anxiety, fear, whatever, doesn't have to be grief, whatever the struggle you have, we grow around that. And most of the time it doesn't go away. In this world, you have troubles are not going to go away. Anxiety, stress, the storms, storms and stress, those aren't going away. So it's how do we grow around? Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
How do we go around it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, okay, so if you take that picture and you move that ball all the way up to the front of the jar, that's actually suicidal ideation. They literally believe like my only way out is through
this one right here.
Ball. Yeah, the only way out is through that ball, and that ball is plugging the hole. So what's the point? And so our job is to let them rest, let that calm down, let the impulsivity drop. And then once they're just okay within their own skin again, they're okay and they can breathe, then we can start to say, hey, let's move. Hey, let's think. Hey, let's talk. But really those first 2 points are way more important, right? Identify their pain and listen to them and understand them.
Sweet.
That's awesome. It's a good picture.
No, I love it.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Not too many comments. I threw Josh's up there earlier, but I'll put it back up there. I'd rather be authentic and real than have all the answers initially. One of my favorite quotes from Craig Gershell says people want a leader who's real, not a leader who's always right.
Yeah.
You don't have to have all the answers. We just got to be real.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, like a lot of times when somebody comes in for suicidal ideation, they're some of the hardest people to get to open up to, because when they do talk, they'll say this: how do I know you're not going to share my info? How do I know you're authentic? How do I know you're not just here for the check? How do you know your insurance company isn't just going to take my records and do something with them? Like they have all these checks that they have to go through, and I don't get defensive at all. I sit and listen. And I take every one of the punches. And sometimes, Lisa and I have these conversations in the office, like, how is it? How'd you break through? How'd you open? How'd you get in there? And sometimes you just sit and listen, and sometimes you talk, and sometimes you lead. So you got to just be authentic with who you are, and the approach, you'll manifest that over time. Like, I'm not saying all of you have to become a therapist, but I'm saying all of you have to become better listeners, because your own kids, your own grandkids, your spouse, your best friend, if you're a minister, if you're a pastor, if you're a teacher, if you're a lawyer, all of these things count, because if you can listen and open up someone's pain and just pull it out, they feel relief already. And then once they leave, and this is where the shedding thing comes in, we just dump that pain. I don't have to carry it, but he or she isn't carrying it anymore either.
Yep.
Okay. So that's awesome. Very good.
Sweet. Last thing, National Suicide Prevention Month is coming to an end. The hashtag is be the one to, and we covered that last time, but be the one to reach out, be the one to be there, be the one to say you love them, you care about them. If you apply that to tonight, be the one to hear, to let them know they're not alone, let them know that they're normal. So just be the one to, don't ever let a moment that someone told me the other day that I read it the other day that if you have a compliment, don't ever hold it in. And I think it's the same thing. If you want to reach out, you want to send a text, you're questioning about it, send it.
Yes.
Send the text, make the call. Don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Yeah.
At any level. So
correct.
Sweet. Well, as always, there are 2 times to be great: when you feel like it, and when you don't. We're out of here.
Amen. Peace.
I had to realize what's inside of me. For all of the people that lied to me, for all of the people that said I would fall off. Oh, boy, what a time to be alive. I wrote this for everyone, feel like they counted out. You need to look in the mirror and tell yourself it's time to be who I am now. Greatness.